Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Matt Madness Unsanctioned. My name is Ron Pashery, columnist for TJRWrestling.net. Here once again, the first ever three appearances, I should say, on Matt Madness Unsanctioned. Paul Carboni, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you.
It's great to be here.
It took us a while to get the first one going. Now we got three in a matter of a month, I think. So I think we're
a while. It took us like 11 months. 10 or 11 months, actually. Yeah. I don't think our viewership would know that.
They wouldn't, but now they do. We're on a rapid pace here.
And now we're the two best friends that anyone ever had.
We are.
We're challenging Chris
Jericho and
tag team right now.
Kevin Owens. I think we could take him out.
Yeah, no, that's not bad.
I have no doubt that we're better friends than the two of them. I don't see you turning on me anytime soon.
I would never.
But the reason I wanted to have you back on the show today, Matt Madness Unsanctioned, I feel for me, I do the regular weekly show where I get to spew all my opinions, and Unsanctioned, I like to bring in other people to get to let other fans know who they are, what makes them tick, what they love about wrestling. So one of the things I know is your number one guy was the Ultimate Warrior, which I believe you're the only person we've had on the show to say that. Shawn Michaels obviously has gotten the most play as number one on people's list.
He's definitely top 5.
Yeah. But I know that the Ultimate Warrior for you, or the Warrior, whichever, do you call him Warrior or Ultimate
I call
Warrior?
him Jim.
Jim, okay.
First name basis.
All right.
Warrior.
Yes.
Warrior.
So you, not only is the Warrior your favorite wrestler of all time, I know that there is a lot more of an attachment that you have to him than just him being your favorite wrestler of all time.
Very inspirational part of my life. It sounds so dramatic and cheesy, you know. I'm 35 with a wife, a mortgage, and a child. And when I look at the timeline of my life, wrestling is it. I think I was telling you before we went on the air, I can calendarize, new verb.
Just coined.
Yes, I can calendarize my life based on the year and what wrestling was doing in that period and what I was doing. And, it all came together for me when I was 11 years old. It was the summer of 92. And the kids on my street were into wrestling, and I wanted no parts of it.
Tatanka was the first match that got you going, right?
They sat me down, and I watched. They used to have the block. It was like Wrestling Spotlights, Superstars Challenge, and they would syndicate the same matches.
Right.
And I remember, I'll throw you a bone, if I watch wrestling, can we go play baseball?
Yeah.
And Tatanka came out, and it was a squash match. And
so you were leveraging wrestling to get to do other stuff with your friends.
And my dad walks in the room, shakes his head, walks out. My mother did not want me watching it, and I understand why. And but man, over a slow couple weeks, it was kind of like, when's that wrestling challenge on? And before you know it,
were you kind of pretending still that you didn't really like it, or you were like,
it just didn't interest me. It looked, and it wasn't even cartoony or fake. I just had other solid interests,
right?
And pretty soon, it's like 10 a.m. Actually, it was like 9 a.m. was WCW. So I would watch 2 hours, 9 to 11 of WCW, then a 3-hour block of wrestling. It's 2 p.m. on a Saturday. I just watched 5 hours, and this was very consistent for me as I began to watch. I would say by the middle of August 92, they were doing the SummerSlam build for Wembley. I saw the Warrior, and I was like, are you kidding me?
Were you hooked from the second the music started, or did you have to see him first?
It was the image. It was the music. It was the bright colors. It was the face paint, the tassels, the hair. I mean, I'm a long hair kind of guy. And it was like, we talk about that it factor, this larger-than-life characteristic that most of those 80s and 90s wrestlers had, and it seems to be missing nowadays, especially with social media. You can reach out almost and touch a wrestler, figuratively. He was inhuman. We have this resurgence now in our culture of superheroes. This was a real life superhero, and I didn't know what I was seeing, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think I alluded in the last podcast, SummerSlam 92 was the big deal. I mean, you think about the names that were involved in that main event. You had Warrior Savage. I mean, 2 classic cartoon characters. Larger than life, flamboyant, great chemistry together. You had Flair and Perfect, who were involved in the storyline.
Yeah.
You have 80-something thousand people. Again, this is 92, so the pay-per-view was, and if you're a wrestling fan who's 30 or over, you watched it on Scramble Vision on Fox.
Yes.
So where I grew up in the summer, we played Release every night, or Capture. Or it's a very
Delco
elaborate game of
classic.
tag. Hashtag Delco. And my buddy snuck into the house to watch the main event on Fuzz. And we were all dying to know who was going to win. I was captivated by Warrior from the moment that I saw him. And so he did the main event in August. They filmed all the lead-in for Survivor Series. It was supposed to be the Ultimate Maniacs, so it was going to be Warrior Savage against Flair and Ramon. And what happened was Warrior had that contract dispute. And there was the walkout, and there was the steroid thing.
Right.
Davey Boy was fired. Warrior was fired. The steroids, we've all read up on it. And right when I could have sunk my teeth into the Ultimate Warrior, he was gone. And it's kind of like that thing, what you can't have, you want even more. So I think that's what made me a student of wrestling, because I would go back as best I could in video at the time.
Right, so you had fallen in love with this thing.
Yeah.
That was taken away from
and
you
it was
immediately.
gone. And,
So the only way to get it was to go back.
I studied up, I watched Mania 6, I watched Mania 7, I went back to Mania 4, which was his first WrestleMania, my best friend and I, who was a Savage fan, he related to me. He's like, I get why you like the Warrior. He liked Savage, but I loved Warrior, and we could talk about that. We're having these interesting wrestling conversations.
Yeah.
And it was, you go to West Coast Video, you rent the same stuff over and over, you watch it over and over, you wear the grooves out, and that's what I did. And, I was a Warrior expert before it was in vogue, before the internet.
Yeah.
There were 2 Ultimate Warriors. The first one was killed by a shark. We've heard the urban legends.
Right.
So for me, I did find other wrestlers who I loved. I really held out hope that by Mania 9 in April of '93 that Warrior would have come back. And I didn't have access to the dirt sheets. I didn't read the Observer like I do now, so I didn't know what the heck was going on. I just knew that he was gone.
Yeah.
And based on what my friends who were really big fans would tell me, that's how I gained my Warrior knowledge. So we fast forward, 93, 94. He was off the grid. He was off the map. You didn't hear much about him. 95, they did the big uncensored angle where Hulk Hogan was alluding to this ultimate kind of whatever. And he used that in his promos, which became litigious between Titan and WCW. It was the Renegade. I remember it was the WCW. It was the main event. It was the lead-in show that they would do on TBS before their pay-per-views. And they were going to unveil him. And I maybe my memory is faulty, but this is how I romanticize it. Again, at my best friend's house, and they're going off the air, and we didn't order the pay-per-view because we had school the next day. Right. I was only, 14. I was a freshman in high school, so I had to be in bed. And they're going off the air, and Hogan's cutting a promo, and there's this fog, and you see this guy that kind of sort of looked like Warrior, but it wasn't quite him.
Yeah.
Ron, when I tell you that I gave hundreds of dollars to the Mean Gene hotline because he would bait and switch us. He would drop names and terms, and I'm like, oh, yeah, Warrior's coming back. So we would pool our money, and we would call 1-800-909-9900 for all the latest. $1.49 for the first minute, 99 cents for additional minutes. Kids, get your parents' permission.
So you didn't ask?
No. And what's really funny is my mother was cool with it.
Really?
Yeah, she just knew that I was gravitating towards this thing, and I had, and I was a huge wrestling fan. So, I'm a freshman in high school. Wrestling was not cool to like in '95. I had a school bag that said Ultimate Warrior on straps.
That's awesome.
I had,
Now, did it come that way, or did you fashion it yourself?
I got a pen, and it was not cool to like wrestling. I was in the ECW. I remember freshman year Spanish, we had to write a fact about ourselves. And I do this now as a teacher, actually. I had the kids write a fact, and then we interview each other. And he got to my index card, and he went, oh, geez. And I'm in an all-guys school, which if you didn't go to one, the atmosphere is entirely different. A lot of testosterone. It's very macho. This kid likes to go to wrestling shows, and everybody rolled their eyes. Little did we know that 2 years later, those kids were also going to wrestling shows.
Yeah.
But, I was going to ECW shows. I hadn't been to my first wrestling pay-per-view was 95, King of the Ring. Anyway, Warrior's off the grid. You fast forward to February 96, I think it was. I had gotten grounded
Wow.
Did something. Who knows what I did?
I don't miss that.
Probably got a bad grade. And my mother went upstairs to bathe my young sister, who was a baby. I'm 15 at the time, so Mom goes upstairs. I'm tuning in at 7:57 for the first hour of Raw. And the lead-in graphic, and I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather. We have news on the Ultimate Warrior. And they put a picture up, and I said, grounded or not. And I remember my mother coming downstairs, and she's like, what are you doing watching TV? And I said, Mom,
the grounding was going to be no obstacle here.
ooh, no. We're not. The grounding is on the shelf for now. They just announced Warriors coming back. I ran to the phone. I called my buddy. Did you see that? Am I seeing things? And I had false alarms. I remember seeing when they debuted Adam Bomb in like '93. They had put a graphic up of him on Superstars, and I had glimpsed it. And I was like, could that be the Warrior? I would grasp at any possible thing that I could to get him back, because every time I got, right when I had gotten to know him, he was gone.
Yeah.
And again, this is before the internet, before I was able to gain knowledge. Warriors going to be at WrestleMania 12, March 31st, 96. It was Palm Sunday. Now, I think you're like me, you're a good Catholic boy.
Very good Catholic boy.
Well, we had to go to the annual Palm Sunday dinner at my grandmother's. And I was fit to be tied because... So even though I got out of the grounding, I was not getting out of this Palm Sunday family dinner. And I remember my passive aggressiveness was while the family ate dinner, I played hacky sack on the front porch by myself in my uber questionable red Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels shirt and my jorts.
Nice.
I distinctly remember this, and I could not wait to get back. And everybody was worried about the Iron Man match, and I even knew at that time it's going to be an hour. They're going to have a schmaz ending. And Michaels was walking out. You could sniff it a mile away. I was only concerned with Warrior and Helmsley.
Right.
I remember there was a big debate as to whether, what's he going to look like? And this was at the point, the big wrestling websites were like Rec Sport Pro Wrestling. Do you remember those?
Not really, no.
They were like small chat rooms, and Warrior was keeping himself kind of like in the spotlight. He was doing the comic book, and he was doing, he did like a workout video, and... I considered myself a Warrior authority then, and I remember getting heated debates. Like, he looks the same. He's muscular. He just released this video. And so, he comes back in 96, and, it wasn't the same. He was gone by July. And 96 was like a really good year for wrestling. And you look at, I think back to the Michaels Austin connection, and they actually looked at the feuding tag team partners. And when you look back, it oddly, in a weird way, holds up. Warrior was gone. His father died. He got into the issue with McMahon. And I wasn't nearly as heartbroken as I think I had been 4 years ago. I was 15 at the time or whatever. And, he came back in 98. I think he came back, it was July 6th. It was the Georgia Dome show where your boy Goldberg defeated Hogan. And, again, I remember I was at my next door neighbors who got me back into wrestling.
Right.
My best friend Jason, we were there that night. It was a great night. Warrior came back, but the wind was out of the sails, I guess. I was 17. I had a girlfriend. Life changes. Yeah. And while I still loved wrestling, I don't know, maybe my taste buds had been satiated. Who knows?
Do you think that... You said you weren't as heartbroken the second time.
No.
Do you think it was maybe that time had passed him by, and it wasn't... Because you said it wasn't the same.
I think so. I was 18. At the time, I was looking into training to be a wrestler. My taste to change in that, again, we're so lucky to have grown up in the Philadelphia area. So my exposure to ECW and different types of hardcore wrestling, and my friends, we were always very educated. And which is not to say that we didn't love WWF and WCW at the time, which is great when people, rag on Vince. It just boggles my mind because that was... the formative time. I was born in the perfect year to be a wrestling fan because I could drive to shows at 18. It was a renegade product. Had it passed him by? Yeah, probably. The way he was used, the entire debacle of the cartoonish nature of his portrayal, it was just whatever. But I still loved him. The Halloween Havoc thing just was left a bad taste in my mouth, and that whole thing. And
you're not alone on that.
Yeah, we still talk about it. It's so bad. So he was gone. And then there came a time where it wasn't cool to be a Warrior fan. if you would have asked the wrestling fan of 2001, 2, 3, 4, and 5, what was their Mount Rushmore?
Yeah.
Warrior, it was not cool. Now,
well, this might be semantics here, but I think there's a marked difference. It wasn't just not cool to like him; it was uncool.
It was
to like him.
It was like I remember when I was actually training to wrestle. I said, I love Warrior. I get it, and I had created a divide where look, I have my favorite wrestlers, Warrior and stuff, but I really like Dean Malenko and Shawn Michaels. And whereas now it's okay to like all of that, we have our WrestleCons and our Comic Cons, and the technology's given us this outlet to kind of like encapsulate. Wrestling eats its past. They're cogs in a wheel, and I'm glad that the fans can keep the memories of those '80s wrestlers alive with technology and these cons. But we didn't have that back then.
Right.
So the first thing that a predominant male audience does is we make fun of that which makes us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, and I got ragged on, and my buddies would bust my chops, and I got it. When I started to wrestle, I wanted to be this serious hybrid wrestler, but I would put things on my arms, and people would ask, why do you do that? Well, that's my tribute to the war. And I very sheepishly would. So,
but the fact that you did it says a lot.
I don't think I'm any kind of trailblazer or anything. I just really like the guy. And, if you look at my high school notebooks, when I tell you I drew the Warrior symbol thousands of times, hundreds of thousands, and I still do it today. So let's get to the good part of the story.
Right.
2004 comes. I was on a wrestling website, and somebody was making fun of Warrior. He was auctioning off on eBay a signed action figure. So I immediately logged on, and it was $60. I was in grad school. I was unemployed. I was studying to be a teacher. Lived at home, and I said, $60 is a drop in the bucket. And instead of the bidding, I bought it now. You had the buy it now option. It was $60. So I got it. I said, cool. And don't you know, a couple hours later, I got an email from Warrior via eBay. And again, not
personal email.
He personally emailed me through eBay. Hi, thanks for bidding. You won, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything I could do for you? and I said, well, I always believe, and I never stopped believing. If you could just sign an always believe, Ultimate Warrior, put my name on it. My name's Paul, and I figured that I would strike while the iron was hot.
Right.
So I drafted an email to him. Basically, it was a man crush love letter.
Okay.
I made the mistake of sending it to a good friend who then sent it out to my other male friends. This email does exist somewhere.
So it's out in circulation.
Yeah,
somewhere.
And it's been held over my head, and there was a time when I was very embarrassed by it, but I basically told him, like, you've no idea what you did for, a ridiculed high school freshman who had nothing to believe in 10 years ago, when it wasn't cool to like you, like I always did, and just thank you for what you did and all this stuff. Well, he emailed me back, and if we came to know Warrior in his later years as very verbose,
right.
Very intelligent, but you think I talk a lot. His email was, and I was doing the Santino around my house. I was calling my friends, like, you'll never guess. And my one good buddy, a trained wrestler who went significantly far in the business, as a matter of fact, he went, and this was cyber stalking before there was cyber stalking, but he went and checked out his eBay profile, and he said, did you know that Warrior recently bidded on a bag of fertilizer for his lawn? So we thought, So Warrior and I exchanged some emails, and I took it a step further. I asked him about the Warrior. He used to wear an earring. It was a Warrior earring. It was the Warrior symbol. And, if you look at the old WWF magazines, you look up close, and I was like, do you have any of them? Because my ears pierced. And he said, Vince McMahon paid $5,000 a piece for them.
Wow.
He said, I can't believe I ever let anybody talk me into putting holes in my body, but I did. But I'll be keeping those. In the same email, I had actually asked about some of his attire. And again, this is what fascinated me about him was his, this guy, like Savage, they invested so much money in their life.
Oh, yeah.
Right here is the WrestleMania 7 figurine. You'll remember that he wore that beautiful coat and he wore the trunks.
Yes.
And it was the WrestleMania 7 career match, and on the back it had the WWF title, and it said, it means much more than this, which my buddies and I always thought was like the coolest thing. Which
it is.
And I said, do you still have those tights? And he said yes. And he said, this is where it got weird. He said, I could sell that stuff to you, but it would cost a significant amount of money, and I have it in storage in Phoenix, and I can tell a person's character, and if you're not interested, like, let's not negotiate or whatever. And I was like, okay. Again, I was 23.
Right.
But I said, okay. I said, it's probably worth more than I can handle, but I appreciate it. And a couple days later, my Warrior figurine arrived, and here it is. Again, 2004, when it wasn't cool to like the Warrior.
Yeah.
And he had signed it, and he handwrote me a letter, and I got a couple 8x10s. And again, I don't know, my good friend who had stalked his eBay account, he read the letter, and it was on letterhead, and it was Project Warrior with this caricature. And he said, and he gave me this idea. I copied his letterhead. I put a plain piece of paper over top and made like 1,000 copies. So to this day, I have the Ultimate Warrior's letterhead. I may or may not have passed it off as my own once or twice. We cannot confirm or deny. So, I'm 23. This is 12 years ago at this point. 2006, the Smear DVD came out. And I liked it only because I got to see the footage and hear people talk about it. So, my fandom has never waned. I've always been a Warrior fan and a wrestling fan. So, for the sake of our listeners, budget on time.
Well, real quick before you get to that.
Yeah.
Because you clearly had multiple communications with him.
Nothing major.
Do you think that he, in any way, your feelings toward him that you expressed, like what he did for you as a youth who had nothing to believe in, do you think he appreciated it, or were you just like another fan that...
I'm sure he did in the moment, but I'm just another fan. I mean, when you think about where we are in the big universe and scheme of things, I was just a guy.
Right.
He was a celebrity and had been for years. I'm sure he'd heard that before. I was never a Make-A-Wish kind of kid, thankfully.
Yeah.
But, we shine the light on Connor's Cure, now like the Warrior Ward and stuff. And I'm lucky to have never had those issues. But I'm normal. I'm privileged. I'm lucky. And I think that, it's really, for me, I'm a very emotional person. And my connection with wrestling is just, it's so odd. And again, it sounds dramatic, but I needed to be able to say, like, my man, thank you. It was just really cool to believe in. On a bad day, I would like play his music, and that was kind of cool. So in 2004, I had that whatchamaface, that interaction with him. You fast forward all these years, and the Hall of Fame becomes its own separate entity with WrestleMania week, and I'd been to WrestleMania. So it's 2014. It's like February, I think it was. And it was right when they were starting to announce the Hall of Fame class. Now, at this point, I'm probably the most informed wrestling fan that I could be, and I'm married. I had a baby, so my baby at the time was about 8 months old.
Okay.
And I'm watching Raw, and my wife decides to take a shower before bed, and I said, let me just watch one more segment. And they said, we're going to announce the first Hall of Famer. Now, I'd been on the Wrestling Observer news site hours before, and I hadn't heard anything. So, they're going to make the Hall of Fame announcement.
Right.
And the screen goes black. And if you could look at that episode of Raw, or if you even just look up the WrestleMania, or the Ultimate Warrior Hall of Fame announcement, it goes black, and you see the neon hit, and it goes into the snarl. And I'm getting chills like thinking about it, what that was said. And immediately my anxiety and my stress level started to rise because, Ron, I've seen every major professional wrestler of the last 30 to 35 years in person. The only one I never saw was Andre. Andre died January of 93. Other than that, you name it, I've seen him. I've even seen some of the stars of yesteryear. I shook Bruno's hand, who was my grandfather's favorite wrestler. And the irony of ironies is, the hundreds of wrestling shows I've been to, at the time, the 3 or 4 WrestleManias I had traveled to, I'd never gotten to see the number one.
Yeah.
And he wasn't just like my favorite wrestler. He was like, when you asked me if you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead, it wouldn't have been God or Hitler. It would have been the Ultimate Warrior. Or maybe Shawn Michaels. So, I wake up the next day feeling really stressed, and I talked to my wife, and we'd always had plans to go to New Orleans, and it just never panned out. Now we have a baby in the picture, and she says, look, you do what you got to do, you go. So that was really that was one issue.
Awesome.
And then, I'm thinking about the money. So my good friend Brian, who, again, the stalker, the eBay stalker, who is...
He's got his fingerprints all over this story.
Well, none of this, the second half of the story doesn't happen about my buddy Brian. Brian's a very good friend of mine, a trained pro wrestler, did work with the WWE. I'd like to say I got him his start. That's another conversation. He called me, and he was getting press credentials to go. Again, he does work for radio stations and always interviews the guys. And he said, look, let's go. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm going to get the press credentials. I'm buying tickets anyway. We'll sort the money out. And, I needed to do this with friends. So my buddy Jason, my other best friend, was already traveling down there with his wife. So what I did was...
So he just happened to be going to New Orleans around this time?
Well, he was going to go, but his wife wanted to go.
Okay.
My wife had the baby, and she very kindly said, yeah, I know you need to do this. Yeah. So what happened was, I'm a school teacher, obviously, and I went to work that Friday, and I came home, and I went to bed really early, and I took a flight by myself Saturday morning at like 4 a.m. So I flew into New Orleans, and Brian and Jason were already down there, and another friend of mine. So we meet down on Bourbon Street. Now, my dream was to see Warrior in person. My other dream, and I didn't think of this at the time, was I would have seen him at WrestleMania and got near the Fink introduce him. Mm-hmm. I don't need to explain it to the fans.
Yeah.
But the Fink was going to say it, and so the day of the Hall of Fame was great. We were in Bourbon Street. We met up at about 1 p.m. My flight got in, and so that night we walked to, I believe it was the Dunkin' Donuts Center, and this was just my buddy Brian and I. So he has a wrestling rule where guardrails and security don't matter. Because if you walk like you belong there, you're going to go in.
They're only obstacles as much as your grounding was an obstacle earlier in the story.
Exactly. And this is where it's very serendipitous. To say that WrestleMania 30 was one of the greatest weekends of my life, it might be the greatest. Who would have known that would have such? And we still talk about it with our collective love for Daniel Bryan, the smart fan base. We walked to the Dunkin' Donuts Center. We were a mile away. And my buddy was dressed in shirt and tie. Brian was. Again, he had press credentials. Mm-hmm. I was dressed in a bright pink, super tight shirt from Express.
Okay.
Khaki shorts, and sneakers. He took one look at me and said, dude, if you're trying to go backstage, this is not how you do it.
This is not the way to get
But
that
I said, stop.
This is the only way I'm doing it.
This is how we're going to do it. So... we went, we signed in, we got our press credential, and you could do certain stuff, but it wasn't like the press credential that got you backstage.
Right.
Brian Socha's rule of life is follow my lead, and we somehow make it backstage at the Hall of Fame. So my head is on a swivel. We end up in an elevator with Jack Swagger, Dolph Ziggler, I forget who else, a couple gorgeous women, and... here's the jackass in Delco's finest, in the
tight pink shirt,
in the extra medium shirt. We take the elevator, and it was funny. I was actually looking for two things: the Ultimate Warrior and food, because WWE catering is legendary.
Yeah.
And we ended up at a table by ourselves, and I had the best andouille sausage. It was delectable. I'm eating this food, and at the same time, there's Rob Van Dam. There's Randy Orton with his now wife, and I had seen the wrestlers before. There's a lot of this going on so that you're not questioned. If you act like you're busy on your cell phone, Ron, nobody's going to bother you. So I did this a lot.
It's like the new version of the clipboard.
Yeah, it is. The list of don't bother me lest I get thrown out. And again, the whole time I'm looking. I ended up out by the loading dock at one point where Jake the Snake was having a cigarette. It was just a really surreal experience.
I'm sure.
I assumed that Warrior was going to come later in the show. I assumed that he would arrive in a limo. I probably wouldn't have had... You can't just go up to these guys. At the time, I'm 33 years old. So it's like, hey, man, how do you do? It wouldn't have... So I'm like, let's go to our seats. The thing is, we could not figure out a way to get to the press box because we were in the bowels of the stadium. And, we had looked a couple times and could not figure out a way. And we finally went to a producer and we said, excuse me, can you... we need to get up. And she's like, okay, just go out here. By this time, the induction had started. Trish Stratus had done the intro speech for Lita. So we walk on out, and I am not kidding you. I walked out on the red carpet with my buddy.
You're on the Hall of Fame red carpet.
As Lita is doing her speech, I walk out in front of the front row of the entire WWE. And of course, as I romanticize it and remember it now, I walked out and the entire front row
just watched you.
And again, in my memory, I feel like there's Steve Austin, there's Hulk Hogan, there's Shane, Stephanie, Triple H. They're all looking at me. There's a silence in the crowd. You can't be loud. There's Lita, and here comes this buffoon in his pink shirt, and it's just extra medium, extra tight. I may have been walking with my chest puffed out, and I was mortified. And I look at my buddy, and he's like, "Just don't make eye contact. Like, just we are Ron. We are on the red carpet. We were where the superstars are walked out to go to their seats." And I'm like, "Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!" So the spotlights are on me. You're in the bowl of the stadium.
Yeah.
We immediately make our way to the back where it's like quieter, where the production is pretty cool. We do make our way to the press box eventually. It was a great night. Warrior speech, Warrior came out, and that was the first time I got to see him. And everybody who knew me knew that I was there. I got to meet my buddy Brian. He came out. I got to see him. He came out with his daughters. Again, I'm a new father at the time, and when he did the deal, I still can't watch it about, I was Warrior a long time ago, but, the greatest thing I ever did was be your dad.
Awesome.
I lost it. I cried, and it was maybe 20-something years of just emotion, fandom, excitement. I was a new father. I am an emotional guy. I cried. It was awesome. I remember walking home that night back to our Airbnb stead with my buddy, and I was just like, "Oh, it was great." And the next night, we still had WrestleMania to go. So
that's crazy when you think about it. You've already done all this, and WrestleMania hasn't even happened.
I know. And I had said, like, if I don't get to Mania, I think I'll be all right. I got to see the Ultimate Warrior. Not just my favorite wrestler, but, I'm a big appreciator of sports and whatnot, but he's always been my number one. I got to see him go to the Hall of Fame. He got his just due. It was a great speech. I liked the edge in it. I liked the zings in it. He got his, and he deserved it. And, all the Warrior fans, they released the T-shirts, and I'm sitting there saying, where were you 10 years ago? But... the En Vogue thing used to be, let's rag on Warrior. It has nothing to do with work rate or anything. We're fans of this because we like stories. We like to escape from reality. I'm an English teacher. I teach the concept of a story and the art form, and art comes from nothing. And for me, he was a great artist. His execution might have been a little rough around the edges, but for considering that he was never a fan or whatnot, like, we're talking about him.
Yeah. Yeah, all these years later.
So, WrestleMania happens. I was in the press box. I was in the highest point of the stadium, again with my good friend Brian. I think he still has the fingerprints on his arm when Lesnar got 3. We can talk about it in the next episode. But, and they were getting the carpet ready for the Hall of Fame inductions. And I'm standing up, and I'm emotional again. Yeah. Thank goodness nobody was around us.
It would have been your letter all over again.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Or your email.
My email. And Brian elbows me, and I'm like, what's up? And he's like, Sergeant Slaughter's here in the press box. You got to shake his hand. Now, I'm sure you've gotten from me that I'm a mark at heart. I am the biggest wrestling fan. If they had WrestleCons back when I was like 16 years old, I would have been hauled out. Of all the times for a bona fide superstar, former superstar, to come out, like, I'm getting ready to hear, and I just realized Fink's going to introduce the Warrior. I'm going to hear him, and the music, and the... So, they're schmoozing, I'm like, hurry up, and, hey, Sarge, how'd you do? And I shook his hand, it was... Hey, Sarge, you remember Mania 7 when, So... Thankfully, I got, he came out and the Fink did the introduction and he did the thing with the crowd, and I was like, man, oh man, this is unbelievable. So I got to see him. The show was, again, it was such a defining, it was a magical moment in my life, the entire weekend. I flew home early Monday morning. My plane was rerouted to Detroit. I didn't get home till late. I ended up with a WWE Championship replica belt. Can't tell you that story here. That's for the members only podcast. My buddies stayed in New Orleans for the Raw that night, where a Warrior gave a speech. What turned out to be his eulogy. I watched it on TV. I had actually, taken off of work that Monday and Tuesday. So my first day back was going to be Wednesday morning. And people knew that I traveled to New Orleans to see my childhood hero. And I turn my cell phone off every night because I feel like nothing good can happen in the middle of the night.
Right.
And hopefully that bad news can wait. So I woke up very early on Wednesday morning. I get up very, very early. And I was getting ready to take my shower before work. And as I'm walking up the stairs, I turned my phone on. And that ominous vibration. I was like, gee whiz. And at the time, my buddies and I, we have like the text chains, and there's like 6 of us all in there, and and there's 48 text messages. And I said, and I couldn't scroll through them all. The coffee hadn't kicked in. And I texted, I said, what happened? And a friend of mine said, I'm sorry. That's all he said. He said, I'm sorry, brother. And I was like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I went to my go-to wrestling site, which is the Wrestling Observer news site, and I saw that he had died. And it's really funny. I always wondered how I would react when Warrior died. Like, is it like a big deal? We joke about death all the time, especially wrestling fans.
Yeah.
They die
ever present.
They die in such tragic, fantastic ways, and I mean, only in wrestling could something like that would happen to Owen Hart happen. And I started to sob. And it was the darndest thing. It was a very true, genuine emotion. It wasn't manufactured. There was nobody around. It was still dark out. And I just cried. I had seen him 48 hours previous. And he died? And I scrolled through the text, and my one buddy had woken up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And the breaking news on CNN was Warrior had a heart attack in the parking lot. And Triple H had broken the news via Twitter. And my wife called up the stairs, and I said, the Ultimate Warrior died. And she said, are you all right? And I said, I don't think I am. So, had I not taken a couple of days off of work, I probably would have taken off work because I was that devastated. It's a vestige of your childhood. And again, I'm 33. Again, wife, mortgage, child. Am I being childish? Am I being dramatic? I got myself together. As we always do, I called my mother on the way to work, and she just felt for me.
Yeah.
I called my buddy Brian, who had gotten me down there. I got to my classroom, and I locked the door, and I called Brian, and I said, he had seen the speech at Raw, and he said, Paul, I told you, he didn't look good. And we look at that in retrospect, and the high blood pressure, the hypertension, the red in the face, armchair quarterbacks. He said, you're a teacher. He said, I need you to get yourself together. And he said, talk to your kids about it today. Make it a teachable moment, a lesson. You got to heal from this. And I teach at Brian's alma mater. I actually teach where he went to high school. This is very circular.
Yeah.
There's a knock on my classroom door. It is my principal and 2 other good friends who wanted to see how my trip went. And I turned to them on the phone. And I said, I actually shooed them out of my classroom with... Again, it sounds... You're crying over a pro wrestler? Like, give me a break. The ultimate...
If you don't know, that is what you would think. But people who know, it's not just that.
Well, my goal was to have it such that I could make it a teachable moment. I hung a T-shirt in my room in memorial. It's actually a bootleg shirt from '96.
Really?
Yeah. And I spoke to my kids about it. And they were so polite and respectful. They were like, man, they all knew how much I loved wrestling. I always did as a moment of zen for them on Mondays. I'd do Macho Madness Monday where as they warm up their laptops and get settled, just a quick 2-minute interview. They don't know what they're saying. And I had started to do Warrior Wednesday. Very alliterative.
Yeah.
And they knew that I liked it, and they knew that I'm a really intense personality. They know that I love my job and my kids.
How old are the kids you teach?
They're high school sophomores. I do teach 9 through 12, but generally 10th graders. And I sat with them that day, and I talked to them about their childhood heroes. And I always tease my kids with that rapport of, they like Justin Bieber. Hockey, they like Justin Bieber. But that day was very serious, and I never teased them, even as jokingly and as lovingly as I do. I never teased them after that for liking Justin Bieber or whatever. That was a really big learning experience for me. I never did it to hurt feelings, but I did do it, just to give them a hard time. And they were really cool. And I would say, I said to my student Sal, who loved the Patriots, what would you do if Tom Brady died? And he said, I'd be really upset. And I said, that's kind of where I am right now. And they were so cool, polite, and respectful about it. So bringing this home, that day, that afternoon, it was a Wednesday. I needed to go to the gym that day, and I couldn't not lift because that's not what Warrior would have wanted. I took the shirt that was hanging up, and I cut the sleeves off because you have to lift without sleeves.
No other way to do it.
And I wore my Warrior shirt to the gym, which I wear every week to this day. And I get to the gym, and I'm getting set up, and I had a rough day. I actually had a parent email me her condolences. She said, my daughter told me what happened. I'm very sorry for your loss. And you could be watching this thinking,
I'm about to get choked up about that because for multiple reasons. One, somebody that means something to you, whether anyone understands it or not, it doesn't make it mean any less to you. You being able to teach, I feel like kids that age a lot of times can be very cynical. You kind of teaching them the importance of that. Like you said, I won't tease them anymore because of who they are.
No, not whatever. For that. I still tease them.
All right, but to me, that you said you wanted to make it a teachable moment. You got through to at least one kid to the point where they explained what they learned to their parents, and the parent felt the need to reach out to you.
It was selfish. I did it for me. It wasn't a standard of education at the time. It wasn't on the curriculum, but the kids were so kind to me that day, and they didn't need to be, and they could have snickered, and they didn't. And kids are cynical. When you're a teacher, you do realize, even at the high school level, that they're still babies, and I tell the kids that, you're still babies, and I do not mean that in a demeaning way, but they're so impressionable. People ask me, what do you teach? What subject? Well, I teach kids. And some of them love me, and some of them hate me. And I think they all agree that I push them. And but that day, I needed them. I needed something. And I told them, who would have known how I would have reacted? Here's this flamboyant, big, muscled wrestler who dies. I go to the gym, and a guy comes up to me, and he goes, "Hey, Ultimate Warrior, didn't he just die?" And Ron, if looks could kill, man. I never said a word to him. I just looked at him.
You didn't need to.
I had the earbuds in, and it was like, are you stupid? I'm not a friendly guy at the gym to begin with, but that was not the day. And so that day, I was doing deadlifts, heavy deadlifts. And I was getting set, and I warmed up, and I settled in for a heavy set. And I know that I sound like a macho meathead right now. And I always have my iPod on shuffle. And a song came on, and it was by the Counting Crows, and it's called "If I Could Give All My Love to You." And Richard Manuel is dead. Now, it sounds very cheesy and corny. I know this is probably the 30th time our listeners have rolled their eyes. My wife had met Adam Duritz, the lead singer of the Counting Crows, years before. That song is written about Richard Manuel, who was the drummer in the band. And he wrote that song at a point where he was feeling very depressed. And he had woken up in bed with a lady, and he'd gotten the news that Richard Manuel had died. And it shocked him, and it brought him down. If you know Adam Duritz and his music, and he's battled depression, and he wrote this beautiful song about it. And my wife has this love affair with the Counting Crows and Adam Duritz, and she's got me into them. And she explained to me, she said, I met Adam Duritz backstage at a show. We shared a cigarette. And my wife always loved Rick Danko from the band. And they had this moment. And they talked about the song, and she thanked him. And it was really cool. And again, a celebrity interaction always means more. And she was teaching me about the Counting Crows, because you have to learn to love your wife's music, whether you want to or not. But I have grown to like the Counting Crows, and that song came on. And again, it's that serendipitous kind of thing. WrestleMania 30 and my travels to see him. And I went to dig my heels in for that first deadlift. And the first licks came in, and again, at the gym, I cried as I did my first set. And I had to stop, and the tears were coming, and I probably looked like I just gotten bad news. It was a point of closure. It was a point of clarity. I had gotten the email from the student's parent. I have it saved in my inbox to this day. I thought it was very kind. She didn't need to be. Ron, we see on Twitter now, we see all over the internet with Dana Warrior. People have the tattoos and stuff, the Warrior symbol. I always said I was going to do it, and I never did, and I probably never will. I actually commissioned, through my principal at the time, a 3-wall mural of the Ultimate Warrior tribute. And back to my best friend, Jason.
And this is in your classroom.
This is my classroom. My best friend, Jason, I taught his cousin, and she was in the National Art Honor Society, and I emails and a couple designs, and long story short, these kids who I taught, we came up with a design, and they spent months of their own time after school, sometimes during school. They redesigned my classroom, and my classroom is now a 3-wall tribute to the Warrior. I have a quote across the top of my wall. I have a caricature of him, of course, with the Always Believe. There's a big, huge mural of him growling. We selected the paint. We selected the colors representative of my favorite matches. And my classroom's going to be raised in 2 years. Raised, R-A-Z-E-D. It means it's going to be wrecked, not raised.
Nice way of saying that.
Yeah, they're redesigning the school. And, I don't do the Instamachat and the Snap-a-magrams.
You're nowhere near it.
I do not do the social media. I check the social media. My kids will tell you that. I always check their Twitters and stuff like that. I just never got into it. But my last goal, I guess, in the saga, to prove to somebody, to the world, to, that how important Warrior was, what his legacy was, not just in wrestling, but I know he had some controversial remarks. He did the DePaul University speech that got him in a lot of trouble, and I get that. And especially now with social media, where everything is kind of like a footprint to what you've done. His message of inspiration, which is the message I have on my classroom, it says, it's about judgment. We worry so much about how we're judged, and I don't care how I'm judged at this point. I'm proudly so. I will, sometimes we do it to the point where we attack other people.
Yeah.
And I want my kids to know that, their greatness as students will silence all of that negativity. And my goal is, you have fans that go to your Facebook site. I would love for them, if we could put some pictures up of my classroom. I want to get this story, these pictures, into Dana Warrior's hands. I did set up a Twitter. I actually have a Twitter handle. It's Destrucity, which is a word coined by Warrior. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
He came up with this belief system called Destrucity. We're going back to 1996. Again, I was a Warrior fan before it was cool. Destrucity 13, and I set up this Twitter thing, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. But I do have pictures of this classroom on the on my phone, which I can send to you. And I just want Dana to see them. In my wildest dreams, I would love for her to reach out to me. I do see what she does on Twitter. She's spreading the power of positivity, which is such a phrase that we hear as wrestling fans. But my kids put their heart and soul in it. This year, the kids that designed it, some of the kids, they're seniors. So they're leaving the school. And it's really been really full circle from the time I was a child. I believed in Warrior at the same time that I was believing in Santa Claus. And now I'm the father of a 3-year-old. And it's never gotten old.
Right.
And yeah, I love the Shawn Michaels. And I can talk to you about technical wrestling. And I know about, tackle, drop down, hip toss, duck the line, take a powder. I know it all. But it all comes back to being a kid. And that's what we do. We watch wrestling for the 17 hours a week that we do.
Yeah.
And
only 17.
You're not a true fan if you're watching less than 15. But I really want to thank you. When I met you via text all those months ago, it was, can I get my Warrior story out there? You've given me the forum to do it. We've been talking for about 50 minutes. And I just kind of want to put it out there. The school is going to renovate. The classroom will be gone. Who'd have thunk it that Ultimate Warrior, one of his messages, is inscribed in the walls of public education? Yeah. Such a conservative environment. But, Yeah, the weekend of WrestleMania 30, man. All the people that got to travel there. We talk about Daniel Bryan, and we have the legacy of Connor's cure.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it speaks volumes in a much, much different way.
Yeah. Now, if you don't mind, like we said, we're 50 minutes in.
Yeah.
A few just thoughts before we close.
If you're still listening, you have no life.
Yeah. So there's a few things. One, the idea of that last promo that the Warrior gave on Raw that night. Obviously, like you said, your friend said he saw signs of him not looking good. I didn't think that at the time.
My friends Brian and Jason saw it at the show. They stayed an extra day in Raw, in New Orleans for Raw, and I needed to get home. And, there's things that you notice at the time that you don't quite really pick up on until something has happened.
Well, it's like looking out the side window of a car. Sometimes things go by way too fast for you to really observe.
My buddy Brian, he does not miss a trick. He remarked to Jason at the time, Warrior looks awfully red. Was he excited? He got blown up, shaking the ropes.
Yeah.
I've showed that promo because it is a very powerful, aside from the fact that it ended up being his eulogy, but I showed that to my kids, my classes. I actually had a group of kids in last week, and we were talking. I showed it to them, and I said, he died 24 hours, not even after this. And the looks on their faces, they said, really? I said, yeah, this was his eulogy. It's something I take into consideration as a person. I try to leave good on the world. Mm-hmm. I'm not always successful. But as a father especially, I know that Warrior's daughters are his legacy. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky I get to be a teacher and really kind of, I can make or break kids. Yeah. And he talked about the running that the man does in life, and it lives on forever. And it really does. It's very prophetic, very dramatic again. But
it is. Well, this is what I was actually going to get to, because he made, I don't remember the exact quote, but he said something about the blood that pumped through the veins. I'm kind of paraphrasing here.
Sure.
Will live on forever. So that he gave that speech, hours before he left the earth, that it was probably in front of one of the biggest crowds he's ever spoken in front of. He's actually been mocked for a lot of his promos.
Absolutely.
This promo, which there was so many things about it that were so profound. Just as a human being living life. That's not even wrestling.
It's a great word. It was very profound.
Not only did that go out to all those people like you who was a big fan. You looked up to this guy. He meant a lot to you. It's not only like that he will live on with you, but now because of you, part of what he did, part of the things he said, and the message that he spread will live on in all these countless number of kids that you will teach.
I hope.
To me, that's incredible.
They get a kick out of him. They see him, and there's the wild guy with the... And, the kids say sometimes, like, you remind me of him. And I'm like, do I paint my face? Like, no, your hair's long and you're crazy. And it's a compliment. Who are we to think that this crazy cartoon character can be taken seriously by the general public? Mm-hmm. I know, I get it. It's kind of cool they can laugh at it, and then we can bring up a sobering kind of, profundity. It is a word. Mm-hmm. It's a noun form of profound. That he gave this speech, and he died, and he did try to spread good. He was always a face. He was never a heel, unless you want to go to the beginning of his career. But I think that kind of says something to his legacy, his belief system. I think he genuinely tried to be a good dude. I may not have agreed with him politically. Mm-hmm. I certainly didn't. That's certainly, a different can of worms. But, he tried to do good. He was very much maligned for it. And I'm not saying he was perfect. But
outside of Mr. Perfect, who is?
Mr. Perfect is perfect. When they tell you kids that there's no such thing as perfect, not true. I know that he said things. I know that he did things, and we can't rake him over the coals for his sins. But if we focus on the positive, and me as a teacher, education ebbs and flows when you're dealing with a bunch of personalities. I'm a human psychologist sometimes. I'm a therapist. Sometimes I do a bad job of it. I get it, but that kind of message for a fledgling adolescent who may be looking for something to latch onto, hey, for me, it was pro wrestling when I was 15. Yeah. I turned out okay, and I know I don't intend to turn these kids on to being wrestling fans, but it's a piece of me. It was very formative, and again, we're talking, Ron, from 1992 to 2016. That's 24 years. Man, I don't see myself slowing down anytime soon with my Warrior love.
Yeah, well, it's a lot. Like your politics are not who you are.
Of course not.
But the way you live your life, the way you treat the people that are around you, that is who you are.
And I think
those are the things that will stand the test of time about him.
I think at the end, his amends that he made, and when you see the Warrior documentary, and he gave the little engine that could to Vince McMahon and things like that. It's so surreal, and I hate that word, but it really is.
You're
when you
right,
see the documentaries they released in the weeks after his death. So that's my Warrior story. It spans a good
decades,
two-thirds of my life. Yeah. Those who know me and they see the shirt, and to borrow a phrase from this WrestleMania 7 tight, my buddy Jason got that for me at a convention. It means much more than this. And by this, I mean wrestling. It does mean much more than that.
It does.
It's very inspirational to me. I think if he who does not believe in anything is destined to fail. And for me, I latched on to this crazy cartoon character.
And it's helped you get to where you are. You used the word magical at one point earlier, and I think Vince McMahon has famously said we make movies. But I think more than that, WWE is capable, and not as often as other things, but often they make magic.
Anybody who's gotten emotional at a wrestling event, show, moment, knows what I'm talking about. And, WWE does those tribute videos, and man, I have a hard time watching them, but
yeah,
you're right, they do make magic, and we're the buyers in.
Yeah, and I have two quick things I want to just add real quick before we end this, because I think it's important, and they're things touching on what you said. Your idea of wanting to thank him, to say thank you, that's something that I've come to really appreciate in the last 6 to 8 months. I met Shawn Michaels in April.
Lucky.
All I said was, I didn't say I need your picture. Let's talk about this match. All I wanted to say.
You didn't do one of these with him?
I didn't. I could have.
Good.
But all I wanted to tell him was just thank you. You put yourself through a lot to entertain me and millions of people. Thank you for that.
And Ron, it's not cool for 30-somethings to do that. Right. It is not cool. It is not macho.
See, I thought I was cool.
Well, not the other thing was the world at large.
Yeah, the other thing we said on a previous episode was how we maybe didn't appreciate Bret Hart enough. I met him just about a month or so ago, and same thing. I looked in his eyes. I know he's had his troubles the last year or two with his health, and he's got a lot of demons, I think. But just looking him in his face, this guy who he gave everything he had to that business. I shook his hand. I just said, thank you. He looked right in my eyes. I told him, all I wanted to say is, I wish you the best in
And Ron, he's heard that a million times.
I know.
Let's hope that it resonated somewhere.
Something about, I don't know, it felt like we shared a moment. And
it'll stay with you.
Yeah, maybe it was just me, and I hope that it meant something to him. But I think that's important. The other thing is, when something bad happens, anything, people will rally around that cause for a time, and then things go back to normal.
They forget it.
Yeah. WWE, when Warrior came back, when he died, there was a lot of love shown to Dana Warrior, her kids, within the wrestling community, the same thing. But again, it's not at the forefront of people's minds anymore. It's been a couple years now. So that's another reason why I wanted to have you do this, because, if people aren't talking about it as much anymore, it doesn't mean people aren't still feeling those feelings. It doesn't mean people don't still believe in that. So that's another reason why I would like this to get in her hands, just for her to know that that impact was made. It has not disappeared. You may not be getting the same amount of attention you were in 2014, but there are people out there who still feel this, who still believe it, who still want to keep his cause and his legacy alive.
I know,
and that's why I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. They have the Warrior Award, the Legacy Award. I believe it's a bit of a bastardized version of his message. In my wildest dreams, I would love to win the Warrior Award just for being a fan.
Yeah.
And I've never had the trials and tribulations some of those kids have had, but yeah, you're right. Out of sight, out of mind. I wear my Warrior shirt every single week to the gym. It's threadbare. There's a couple holes, but I'll keep it forever.
Yeah.
I actually bought 7 of the same shirt from Urban Outfitters all those years back. So I'll be repping Warrior for some time. Yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for telling your story. It took a little bit of vulnerability for you to come on here and do this, so I appreciate it. Yeah. Everybody out there listening, watching.
Crying.
Yes, if you're crying, we'd like you to share this with Dana Warrior, with people who follow WWE, as many people that could hear this story, share in this message. We'd like that to happen. These pictures from your classroom, we posted on our Facebook page, on our Twitter. So keep an eye out for that. And like I said, spread the message to as many people as you can. Paul, once again, thank you for doing this.
It's your form.
I appreciate it.
Awesome.
And I look forward to having you on here again.
We'll do it soon.
So for everybody out there listening, that was the show, and we will see you next time.
If I